Hello, fellas and ladies. This is Mark from the White Grape podcast. This is the first unofficial, or official, I should say, episode of the podcast. And I just want to say that I'm most likely going to disappoint everybody that eventually watches this, past or future. I disappoint most people in my life, so the podcast will be probably not much of an offshoot from that general experience in my life. So, again, just to kind of get into the nuts and bolts, this is going to be kind of a scattershot of a podcast where I kind of just pick apart different subjects until I really get down to kind of what I want to do this for, because one thing I know for certain, that's about it. I just want attention of some sort, so I'm going to keep doing this until I get said attention, right? So, no, but to be serious, the topic that I came semi-prepared with today to speak about is one that's it's relatively close to my heart, because it's something I see to be a problem on both ends of the political spectrum, is the inability to just kind of jump into it here, guys, is the inability on both sides to use nuance or to look at things from a nuanced perspective. And just to kind of break that down a little bit, this is side independent. Doesn't matter to me whatsoever what your political spectrum is, what you believe in, what shape and color your body is, if you can fly, if you have telekinesis. Doesn't matter what you are. If you have an inability fundamentally to connect with people, or in the very least have a discussion with people that think differently than you, then that's on you. That's not on the person that you're debating with. And again, just to kind of curtail this into a conversation about religion, but where I see this most often is just to kind of touch on the conservative side of things. On the right side of the political spectrum, what I tend to see is people that use religion. And it's not necessarily bad to use religion, because I identify as somebody who follows Christ. I just don't necessarily define myself as being a particular denomination of Christianity. But to kind of get into what I was trying to get to a second ago, majority of people with quote unquote conservative leaning views only have those views because they grew up in a family structure and a culture around them that encouraged those views. So oftentimes the biggest mistake I see conservative people going, even though I agree with the majority of their points, both economically and socially as far as politics goes, the big issue they have is viewing everything from the lens of, well, this is my experience. This is what God would want. This is my particular experience on the matter. It's what my family experienced. My family's the perfect, expression of what Christ and living a godly life is supposed to be. And unfortunately, that's the hole I see a lot of people fall into on the conservative side of things, is just assuming that because they experience something, it is right inherently. Okay? And there's a similar problem on the left, as we all know, which is, these are the same people that are making it a hate topic to try to discuss whether or not somebody being born with, let's just say 30 years ago, someone gets born with male genitalia. Nobody's going to be going, all right, this is potentially a girl. Let's wait for this guy with a penis to decide whether or not, which bathroom he needs to use, because that's the most important thing going on in politics right now. So again, from a right-leaning perspective, people are guilty of that, but from a left-leaning perspective, equally so. The main difference I see between liberals and conservatives is that the conservative hypocrisy tends to stem from a religious standpoint. While ignoring all of their own weaknesses and their own hypocrisies and logical gaps and whatnot in their own reasoning. The left is also guilty, but just with a science-based version of that, right? Where they lord science around as if it's like some omnipotent God that can never be questioned, when the whole idea of science is to question it constantly with hypothesis and with testing those theories. A lot of what the left does nowadays is take science and, facts, mathematics, whatever it is, studies, statistics, and mold them and bend them to their will, and then claim that those statistics and those facts and those sciences now take the place of God in their lives. So both people on both sides are, in my opinion, and again, I could be wrong as well. I'm kind of talking out of both holes, if you know what I mean. My opinion is that both are arguing from a self-perceived sense of being above the other person morally. Not sure if that makes perfect sense, but hope people get the general gist, which is they're arguing from a position of authority on both sides, which makes it nearly impossible to meet in the middle and have some sort of more balanced discussion about, where the two, in a functioning society, you need to be able to have those conversations. And in my opinion, the biggest issue that we've been running into as of late, politically and just as a country, is that we're unable to have those conversations on either side. And again, I'm not trying to make this particular to conservatives or liberals. It's just a common theme I see amongst the two, right? Imagine it this way, right? And this isn't, I'm some libertarian who's above the whole thing. Let's watch the petulant children fight. That's not where I'm trying to come at with it. That's not the perspective I'm trying to push across. I'm just saying that on both sides, I see hypocrisy. So just to kind of dive into the nuts and bolts here, on a particular issue that I think would relate to this conversation, abortion's a huge one, right? And from the conservative side of the spectrum, I understand their argument, which is, hey, is that your body or is it God's body? Sex is a choice. This is arguing from the conservative side of things, right? Sex is a choice. Abortion is a choice. All of these things are your own free will. You're choosing to act on these things. You have to deal with the circumstances and the repercussions. And I understand that. But from a left-leaning point of view as well, they go, well, are you a woman? Which I understand this, even though to play devil's advocate, because I don't necessarily agree with this perspective. I'm just putting it out there, right? From the left-leaning perspective. You're not a woman. It's like me coming over to a guy and telling them you need to get a vasectomy at 30 years old or so. You need to be essentially impotent at 30 years old. Do that. It's a bad comparison, but you get the gist. It's how would you feel as a woman being told by somebody, hey, you're not allowed to do this. We're allowed to do elective things with our body. You're not allowed to do elective things with your body. And I know then you get into the nuts and bolts with all the moral and religious aspects of it. And to be honest, I'm not a supporter of abortion. I wish people would use more self-control and just control. But I understand the argument on both sides to a degree. Okay? I think now that this is no longer a federal issue and it's been passed down to states' rights, it shouldn't be as much of an issue. But the problem is that, again, oftentimes when people are trying to avoid having rational discussions or when they know there's holes in their logic, and again, this applies to both sides, what they do is they take the most extreme example or the most emotion-inducing, whether that's positive or negative, topic from their political spectrum and go, let me throw this out here and kind of trap this person and see what the response is. Because there really is no good response to, like, what's your views on abortion? Because you're going to isolate and upset probably at least 50% of the people that are listening. You're going to win over maybe 30 to 40%, and then there's going to be like 10 to 15% that are just indifferent. So it's a lose-lose to even bring this up now, and that's kind of why I believe these kind of topics, right? The gender identity, abortion, the LGBTQ stuff, I believe that's why it's being pushed so hard on both sides and why it's been such a focus while the, things that actually matter, like the economy and like the government as a whole and foreign intervention and, domestic policies and all this stuff are being ignored just so that we can discuss the same played out topics for, 20 years about, well, he feels like a fighter pilot today. And, well, I'm pretty sure I saw an engine on him. Are you sure he's not a car? Or, well, it's like, well, yeah, I had a baby, we get it. It's stuff that happens. Life sucks or life's difficult. But, again, there's a laser-like focus on these issues, and that's kind of why I wanted to go over them just real quickly, right? So again, just to address the abortion issue, I understand on both ends where people are coming from. It's very easy if you're not a woman who hasn't had a very particular, unique set of life experiences to come into a situation where you go, well, I got all messed up. I went out and got drunk, and I'm gonna have some kid from some guy that I don't like who's like, I met him in an Arby's bathroom, or I met him outside the airport. He was digging through the trash. I'm just joking, but like again, these are real life scenarios where people go, do I want to spend the next 20 to 30 years paying for and basically dedicating my life to somebody's kid that I don't even love, that I didn't even mean to have, when I could just pop down $300-$400, get rid of this thing that, in my opinion, isn't even sentient yet. So I understand that. That's not my opinion, right? I'm just coming from the opposite standpoint. I get that. I get how you can look at it and go, and from the liberal state point of view, they see how these government figures treat the homeless and how they treat people that actually need, support in these inner cities and just in general in bad areas. They know that like a majority of the problem people have with these conservative, quote unquote, religious types on the right, to argue from the devil's advocate standpoint, is just that they're more concerned about from the perspective of these leftists, they're more concerned about the people that are not even born yet versus, the people in the prison industrial, the prison industrial industry or whatever it is. Just people in prison, people who are homeless, people who can't afford bills, letting in, I don't know, tens of millions of people that we can barely afford our own people. So it's just like, I understand how the left looks at people, particularly really conservative religious types, and goes, well, you're a hypocrite. You don't care about people once they're born. You have the death penalty. You throw people in prisons for the rest of your life. You don't set up these policies in a humane way. You have the money and resources to help out. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get at, is I'm saying a lot to say this, is that the reason it's great to have the left and the right, it's great to have the political spectrum so that we can kind of pick and choose different identities from both ends and kind of figure out what works best for us. But where we get lost in the sauce, in my opinion, is we forget a very crucial fact, which is it's the government and it's the people in power and it's the elite, not to sound conspiratorial, but yes, that are making these decisions and wanting us to fight each other, because they know good and well that if we directed this energy towards them, and we went, well, yeah, we can argue and kind of like fist fight. It's kind of like, fist fighting at a bus stop. And then you look up and you go, wait, I don't even know you. Where's the guy I wanted to fight? That's kind of what it is with the government. They have us fighting each other and, fighting our neighbors and just fighting people within the community and at our job, rather than looking upwards and going, well, these are the people that are kind of stirring the pot here. It's not really, Jim Bob down the street who likes to go fly fishing on Tuesdays with his wife. It's not really him, even though we have differing views. It's, the people we should be looking at are the people that kind of control and manipulate these decisions so that they come out the way they do. Right? And I think if there's one thing we can all agree on, regardless of what side we're on, it's that, and I don't like the idea of sides, but I'm just saying it, right? Is that the people at the top genuinely do not, and I don't believe have ever truly had our best intentions at heart. I don't think that's ever been something they've had. I don't think it's something they will have at any point in the future. And I think if you hold your breath waiting for these changes to take place, it's going to be a long, long time. You might lose consciousness trying to hold breath waiting for some sort of change. So again, it kind of long-winded here and all over the place, but the point being is that despite even crucial, topics like LGBTQ and abortion and all this stuff that really separates those two groups, where we can pull it together and agree mutually is that we're not the ones that ultimately have a say in these situations. It's not going to be us. It's not going to be your neighbor Jim Bob. It's not going to be your nephew with autism. It's not going to be, the duck down the street that's smoking some menthols over by the pond and looking like really, he's looking kind of territorial. You don't want to go over to that duck because you're afraid he might bite you. It's not going to be any of those people or things. It's going to be the government 9 times out of 10, 100 times out of 100. And I know this is kind of like, yeah, I mean, that's obvious. Who else would it have been? But people forget this because, again, I'm a conspiracy-minded type of individual, right? And if you look at the government and how it's functioned since its inception in the United States, while democracy is great and a republic, a republic is great and the Constitution's great, there's only so much that you can be accomplished by voting. And by, talking to my constituents and talking to local government, there's only so much that can be done because ultimately who we're at the mercy of is the people that kind of push and pull them, the money changers, the people who push and pull the money. And I'm not trying to make that sound like I'm going against any particular group of people. I'm not. I'm just saying it's a catch-all term, right? We're going against the people in power, the 1% that make these decisions. It's not your neighbor or your friend or your manager at work or whoever it is. It's the same people it's always been. But I guess the second part of this video or this podcast, is the first one. So be careful with my achy breaky heart here. Just to kind of wrap this video up, I think it's important when people have these discussions about politics, specifically very hot button issues like the ones we discussed earlier, that they keep in mind the government's worst fear is us coming together and actually being able to have some sort of discourse outside of just hurling feces at each other and like calling each other names and stuff. If we can get past that, if we can get past chimpanzee locked in a enclosed exhibit with not enough food or supplies for 3 years, finally having a mental breakdown level where we're just attacking each other and, hurling feces at each other and screaming and, ripping at each other. If we can get past that level, which is what we've been plateaued at we've been stuck on that level for the past, I think, 20 years at this point. So if we can get past that, I think we got a bright future ahead of us. But just keep in mind, for all the people that are so emphatic for both sides, whether you're conservative or you're a leftist, the party generally does not have your best interests at heart almost all the time. And if people are in a position, people can have their own opinions about individuals. I think individuals, Trump, I don't view necessarily as a part of the Republican structure. I think he's an outsider that came in, which is part of the reason he has so much support. But just in general, the long-standing Republican and Democrat parties are full of shysters, criminals, liars, schemers. Would set an entire orphanage ablaze if they could have another $10, or would set an entire orphanage ablaze if they could get into Dorsia or whatever that club was from American Psycho, before Paul Allen. That's the type of people we're dealing with. A guy who would set an orphanage ablaze, or people that would set orphanages ablaze en masse, to be able to get in Dorsia before Paul Allen. Okay, that's the types of individuals we're dealing with on a fundamental level. So just keep that in mind when we're kind of picking away at each other. Because again, it's crabs in a barrel. We're all stuck in the barrel. We're all trying to fight out of it. So, what they want, what a corrupt power structure wants, is dividing and destroying, having them fighting each other, splitting it up versus race, background, or sexual orientation, skin color, culture, all it is. And ultimately, who's not making the decisions on little old me and yours behalf, or little old me and the viewers' behalf? It's not me. It's not other people that look like me. It's the people at the top, people at the absolute top of the spectrum. And again, I'll make a separate video about, at some point, kind of tackling the subject of ethical billionaires and non-ethical billionaires and people that are uber wealthy but ethical. I think there are a few. I don't think it's necessarily a moral, look at this. It's not like you're not going to get like MLK props or, Gandhi or Jesus Christ types of notoriety from being a billionaire. Because again, if you were to share at least even 10% of that wealth, you could change a lot of stuff in the world. So I understand the arguments 2 and 4, and I'll make another video about that at some point. I just kind of want to wrap this up because going in a circle and my tires are spinning out here, losing air. So, again, this is Mark from the White Grape podcast. Plan to come on here and kind of wax poetic. And by wax poetic, I mean just kind of get on here and scream about things that upset me. If you guys have some time and if you want to live, subscribe to my channel, like the video. And, yes, that was a threat. So, subscribe and like my channel, share this podcast, and make sure it gets big, man. All right, bye-bye.